Something which is very near and dear to my heart are video games. I've been playing them since I was a kid and they always served as a sort of escape from what was going on in the real world. And as I got older, and more stresses were piled on top of me, that's continued to be true. But rather than jump into one new game to the next, I've stuck with a couple of games or game series for quite some time. Those games make me realize something: I highly value art direction over having the most stellar type of graphics. Hello and welcome, I am the Anonymous Weeb and this is a video discussing my own personal thoughts on the debate about art direction versus graphical fidelity, brought on by discussions I've heard in the Elden Ring community. Before I start the discussion, I'd like to clarify that what I mean by art direction and graphical fidelity, to me art direction is the actual design of everything, from the simple way a sword looks, to how a blood splatter sprays from a struck enemy, whereas graphical fidelity is how clean, how crisp or how HD something looks, or I suppose how many tiny pixels are fitted into to make the image. But that's all I had to say, so let's get into this whole thing. First things first, we all know, or at least should know, that art direction and graphical fidelity don't have to be separated up, and a game can have both of them if the time, resources, and vision is there for the game to be developed in such a way. The reason that a game usually highlights one over the other is due to restraints put on the project, sometimes by internal and sometimes by external sources, although sometimes a game is developed in such a way as to highlight a particular something about the hardware it is being demonstrated on. For instance, Demon's Souls can be considered to be a stunning display of the graphical powerhouse the PlayStation 5 actually is. Hence why a lot of the shine is put on the game's graphic in comparison to dealing with issues that were in the initial PlayStation 3 release. The game already had stellar art direction, and thus the purpose of the remake was to improve the graphics and to highlight just what was possible for Sony's hardware going forwards. Some games, however, are developed with other things placed more importantly at the core of development, games which prioritize art direction because they don't have the designs to fall back on, or they are seeking to do something new that distinguishes them from a previous title. I find it odd how many people complain about how certain games that come out now are ugly or not next gen because they don't have the same level of shine and polish on every single blade of grass, but at the same time they consistently praise games like Ocarina of Time, Skyrim and Dark Souls 1, all games that don't have stellar graphics. In some cases the gameplay isn't the greatest, and yet these sorts of games often come up on people's lists of favorite games of all time, and for whatever reason they get a pass for not looking next gen but still being considered outstanding by today's standards. It really makes me question if people actually care about a game's graphics as much as they say they do, or they are only speaking out because they feel like that's what the masses want to hear, or because they have some sort of expectation and bias that new games should look a certain way, or else the developer is being lazy, or somehow the game will be bad because it doesn't have 4K graphics or whatever the high end is now. I have never understood the desire for games to continue to push for better and better graphics, to try and compare themselves to a TV show or movie. When compared to them, they are an interactive experience, where I feel the focus should be put on providing the player an experience that can only be gained through a game. And I feel art direction is at the core of that, because before you can start programming a game, you need to know what the game will look like, what you're trying to achieve. Even before gameplay is considered, art is needed to base that gameplay upon. If the art direction is bad, the game is going to suffer for it, ranging from clipping to unremarkable features that just meld together in your mind, and unclear direction to the player about how the game is responding to them. For a game to truly distinguish itself from a film, it needs to do the one thing films can't do, and that is to give you, the player, the ability to interact with the world. And if the game doesn't show that meaningfully, that you end up with a game that feels more like a movie and would probably have been better off as a movie. Sorry if what I'm saying sounds a little redundant, I'm sure most people understand these things already, but I just couldn't get the thought out of my head. Anyway, I am reminded of a phrase for this video: no matter how much you polish a shit, it will always remain a shit. That pretty much sums up my whole feelings on the subject. No matter how many pixels you stick into the screen, if I can't clearly see what I'm looking at because everything just seems mashed together or is too abstract to clearly indicate to me what I'm looking at, then I'm not going to enjoy myself. But that's it, just my thoughts on the subject. I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments down below on the subject, and while you're down there feel free to like and subscribe. I'm trying to reach 500 subscribers before the end of the year, and I'd love to have you along for the journey. Otherwise, make sure to have a nice day or night wherever you might be.